Hey, thanks for being a part of the conversation. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 294 is with Payne Lindsey from the podcast Talking to Death.
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Absolutely fantastic. I'm going to start it off with this question because I got to know, are you still stalking Ewan McGregor?
I think that I've discovered that he's stalking me, and now I'm the one who's paranoid.
Don't you hate it though when you do that, when you bump into somebody and you keep bumping into them and you're trying to figure out, okay, what life am I living? Is this just another universe like Marvel or what?
Yeah, I'm like, is this like some glitch in the Matrix situation, or is it like some destiny, or am I just crazy? Like, what is happening?
I got to ask you, I realize you started your podcast in 2016, but you are way too smooth to be a podcaster who's only like 7 years old. Where did all this smoothness come from?
Well, thank you. I didn't know I was that smooth. I think it honestly just came from me being a fish out of water and doing this in the first place, and just putting a lot of time, thought, and care into the presentation of this, assuming that someone's going to say, this guy shouldn't be doing this, because that's how I felt, right? And I think I just made myself get better at it.
Dude, I remember being with iHeart, and I was telling them about this thing called podcasting back in 2012, and they go, I don't know what you're doing. Just keep doing it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, they should send you a check for that.
So what was it like to sit down and break it down with Jeff Foxworthy? Because it really seems like he was trying to make a comparison between comedy and what he's got a final part of his joke, whereas podcasters, we don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he has some really good points about that. It's funny because I've always found him hilarious. As a kid, I grew up watching this guy. And so to be sitting down across from him talking on my show was surreal and super fun. But yeah, I think there is something about comedy and dark humor. I mean, even if I'm deep in some sort of missing persons investigation and I'm doing all this stuff and it's really heavy material, sometimes like, behind the scenes, the only way to kind of really keep your mind clear and keep going and not lose it is a little bit of like gallows humor, where you're kind of, it's so bad, it's absurd in a way, almost in a way to like digest it.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is some weird like line sometimes between humor and, the worst things on earth.
Yeah, because I mean, you even stated it. If we can't relate with it, how are we supposed to even laugh about it? I mean, we have to have that dark side. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that, that if you can do that, I think that you've taught yourself something in terms of like how to cope with life. For me, that's how I like to do it.
Yeah.
If it's so bad, it gets so bad, it's funny, because it's just so bad, it's ridiculous.
I would love to see your personal research on when you put one of these crime podcasts together in the way that it's like, okay, why are they coming here? How long do I have their attention? And have I gone too far, or have I not gone far enough?
You mean like in the storytelling process?
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, one of the reasons why I created the podcast in iHeartRadio called Pod Crashing was because I was really going to go on there and I was going to become a critic. And I sat down to do the first show because it was against Will Ferrell. And I said, I don't have the balls to do this. I don't want to do this. And so I thought, okay, if I can't critique them, then teach them. And I feel that when I listen to your podcast, because you get on there and you question the monologue. Is this too long? If you're not going to be here, I don't care. Go now, but hopefully you'll find me later. I mean, I love the way that you're so open.
Well, thank you. I mean, I honestly make all of my shows how I would want to listen to them.
Yeah.
As a person who doesn't really, whose like attention is hard to get, right? I'm the kind of person who has ADHD brain, and I might tune out of your podcast in 1 minute if I'm not being helped along or intrigued or hooked in some way. So I'm kind of making it where like, okay, I'm consciously thinking about those little intricacies as I'm building it. So it grabs my own attention, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I feel like I'm conceited when I do that, because I'll take my podcast out for a walk. I'll sit there and listen to it in the real world in the car, because I'm thinking to myself, this is where the listener is, dude. Figure it out.
It's kind of true, though. Yeah, that's what I always do, too. It's like I never go back and listen to old stuff. But once I post a new episode, the morning that it comes out and it's already live, where it's too late to take it down, I'll listen to it one time, like on my commute, and I'll just really kind of give it a solid critique of my own, knowing that I can't go change it now.
Right.
And so if I really hated it, I'll always remember that, and I won't do that again the next time.
Wow. I've never met anybody who gave away a podcast studio. Where did that even come from?
I was honestly just sitting in my studio, and I was like, what can we give away in here? I was like, actually, you know what? Like, we have a couple extra. I was like, wait a minute. And like within 5 minutes, we walked around and, we had like a entire extra setup that like, I mean, in 2016, I would have, sold my Xbox for, so I was like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. And also, I didn't know how to even assemble something like that back in the day. So, I just thought it'd be a fun thing to give away.
So where did you find it in your heart and your creative path to decide that I'm not going to settle on one? Because, dude, I have 14 podcasts. So when I heard about all of yours, well, it's because I'm a radio guy. We're taught one thought per break. Why am I putting rock stars with chefs? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, so it's like, okay, so create a podcast then, dude. One thought per break. And you're doing the same thing. You've got so many. How are you keeping your head on straight?
I mean, I think that it's how I got here in a way. I mean, I made Up and Vanished in 2016 and it got really popular, and I was the Up and Vanished guy. And I wanted to, I almost felt limited by that, even though it was, the most accolades I had ever got for anything I'd done. I felt limited by that. And I immediately went and made, with iHeart, Atlanta Monster, which was a totally different story. Be able to explore as a creator. And as long as I can keep getting the opportunity, I'm going to keep trying to do that. Yeah.
You always say yes. I mean, that's what I can feel that in your presentation.
Well, I definitely say no sometimes. I say yes to you, though.
But to build it, that's one of the things that listeners, so you do a podcast. What is it, like 15, 20 minutes? I wish it was 15, 20 minutes. I mean, the hours that you must put into your presentations.
Yeah, it's like unquantifiable, to be honest. People ask me all the time, like, how long does it take? I'm like, I don't know. It takes forever. Like I might work for a half day on 1 minute, but then at the same time, I might finish 25 minutes in 1 day. Wow. Depending on how it's structured and what it is. There's a lot of different layers to it, especially with like a true crime story that I'm telling. It's, there's interviews that I've really done and, taking these pieces out and painting a story with them and using music and what's the most clever way to arrange this to get your attention and to have this payoff ending and keep every episode kind of folding on top of itself and snowballing into some sort of conclusion? And how do I sound like I'm not being, too much of this, but like relatable and like, hey, like we get it. Don't be like fake, but also hold my hand a little bit because I need it. Like, what's the balance, right? Wow. And I'm just always trying to think about that.
Are you doing your own editing, or is it Mike that's helping you out there? I mean, what's his job?
Mike is definitely probably my go-to editor. I still edit most of my podcasts, not entirely, but just a little bit of a hands-on thing, just to have my blueprint, like just my touch on it. But I kind of like editing, though. It's to me, it's kind of how I've been able to get as deep as I've been able to get into the stories, is by editing it and listening to this tape over and over again, kind of drilling it into my head where I feel like I have this genuine understanding of it that I might not get from just listening to it, like the finished product one time. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you ferment it? In other words, do you set it aside and come back as the editor? Because the performer and the editor are not the same people. And it's like, I have to keep them separated.
You have to. Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to say, okay, that's it, come back. And then if you're in a groove, try to stay in there as long as you can to get that thought out. But eventually you're like, okay, you're beating a dead horse. It's like, you can't, you're going to keep touching this thing, and you're going to end up breaking it if you don't just come back to it later and see it from a different perspective.
Do you left hand, right hand your tracks? Because, I mean, like, my questions are in the left track right now. Your answers are in the right track. Only because when I screw up, I have to go back in there and redo my question because I'm going to screw up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I if I'm in person, it's harder because you might hear me in the background a little bit. But if I'm doing a phone call interview, right? I might step over you in our conversation, but not in my edit. I'm not going to, right? I'm gonna sound real good. Yeah.
Let's talk about that title, because they always teach us, when we go to our little podcasting schools and seminars, that talking to death. What made you settle in on that title?
I think because it's a phrase. It's like an idiom that people are loosely familiar with. People have said that before.
Yeah.
It has a touch of the true crime element that you might know me for. And it can get dark and weird, which is a lot of the stuff I create and do is that. And also it's just quite simply like, I'm going to talk you to death.
Yeah.
And really that's kind of what it literally means to me. But I also kind of do things that have to do with death, but it's kind of it's more of a not serious approach to the stuff that I do, which is sometimes very serious.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed on my iHeart app, and it just might be the app, I don't have a picture of you up there. There's nothing that's promoting the show. It's just a blank box. Are you doing that on purpose?
No, it sounds like an error.
Yeah. There's something wrong, because I mean, that to me, that's, judging a book by its cover. I'm going, well, damn him. What, he won up to me, man.
Cover.
Yeah.
There's no face.
So were you shocked about Steve-O when he started talking about the crime stories and stuff? Because I mean, I had no freaking clue that he was so into it like he is.
I really didn't. And that was, I was pretty nervous for that one, because I mean, I grew up watching this guy. And I just know him as the guy from Jackass, right? I mean, he's Steve-O. I mean, I grew up watching like the MTV show and then the movies. And I'm like, okay, I'm talking to this guy and he wants to talk to me about something serious. I'm like, can I even do this? And, I was like, maybe he'll just be cool. And like, we sat down and he was super cool. And he goes, okay, so I want to talk about the death penalty. He just went straight into it. And I'm like, in the edit, we moved it around because it got so serious so fast. I was like thinking in my head, I was like, man, I had this whole idea of wanting Steve-O to give me a tattoo at the end of this. And I don't know how I'm going to get there. Because we're talking about something really serious right now. But we ended up having this really amazing conversation that went all over the place. And I was just like blown away by just how candid he was and the depth he had about serious subjects. And how it was a kind of a surreal experience talking to Steve-O from Jackass about, the death penalty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in reality, that dude should have the perfect life. I mean, he came from a very, very big family. He traveled the world. I mean, many of us are out here going, God, I want to do something like that. But he wants all the attention.
Yeah. I mean, he's like the class clown of America almost, right? It's like he really truly is that guy who thrives off of that. And he'll tell you that. And once you kind of understand that and you realize he's being serious about how he feels about seeking attention and like the work and time and, respect he puts into his stunts, you get that, oh, wow, he's not just like lazily doing this. He's not just sloppily putting this together. This is like a performance. It's like a lifetime performance in a way.
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, I really was drawn into the story when he says, okay, well, I'm only as good as my last stunt. What am I going to do next? And I feel like as a podcaster, we have to do the same thing. What's next?
Yeah. Yep. And then I was like, that one hit home. I was like, well, I know that feeling. And it's like, wow, it just turns out this is your craft, right? And like Elvis seemed like it was like, well, duh, yeah, like this is what he does, but you just don't look at Steve-O like that, right? You don't, you kind of throw out that this is some sort of craft of his, but really it is. I can't do that stuff. And he's done a really good job of not really hurting himself. He's kind of like a nimble gymnast in a way. I mean, I would have already broken my neck.
Oh my God. And you invite people to watch the video, which I think is fascinating that you've jumped on that. I'm a radio guy. When I saw Casey Kasem on the Hardy Boys back in the 70s, I thought, I don't like him anymore. I don't like the way he looks. That's not the way I envisioned it. Right. But you're doing the video thing. I mean, where's the mystique in this, man?
Man, I just I came from the filmmaker brain.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't to me, I looked at like someone like you as the radio person that does what I can't do, right? Then I ended up making podcasts in my career. But because I'm capable of filming this, I also wanted to, because I've done so many deep dive investigations and talk to people in person, I wanted to get that in-person vibe if I could create it. So I've really gone out of my way to do all these interviews in person, which has been difficult. And like if we're here, let's just film it. Because I think that, at the very least, I want to show you a moment from this, because I think it might mean more if we do it right. And so we're kind of we're not trying to do it just for fun. We want it to be kind of to live a little bit longer, or be an extra layer of the experience if you want there to be.
Speaking of that living longer, boy, my eyes were opened up when he said that. When he says when Steve was talking about, I'm going to do video and it's going to last long, and then when he realized it does not last that long.
Yeah. I mean, he seems like like mortality kind of, or the idea of mortality really kind of kicked in. And
yeah,
I mean, that kind of spooked me. I was like, wow, like Steve-O's saying this. When is that going to hit me? Or has it already? Is it hitting me now? Like, I don't know.
I got to ask you the same question that I do all my murder mystery authors that I talk with. And that is that why aren't you putting yourself on the stand when you've got all that information in your hand about these people that should be in prison? I mean, or are you being called to sit on that stand? You've got the information.
They don't want me to.
Why?
They don't want to incentivize a podcaster to solve their murder. They don't want to do that. And like, they just don't. And I've had some really bad experiences. I've had some outlier good experiences. I'll say like the Colorado Bureau of Investigation did reach out to me, and I've shared with them all of my tape. And I said, hey, I'll give this to you either way. But my one request is that I get to record all this. And he said, sure, that's fine. I'm like, awesome. So you'll hear that one day. But yeah, I think that, up in Vantage season 1, Tara Grinstead, who was murdered in South Georgia, they eventually had a trial last year. And the prosecution called me as a witness, but only just to try to keep me out of the courtroom.
Oh, man.
And they just, it was kind of like some middle school playground immaturity level stuff. And they lost the case, which it's like, all the information I put out there was for them to consider. And I don't think they did. I think they just wanted to be right instead of trying to find what made sense.
Do you see yourself as a journalist or a podcaster?
It's one of those questions where I'm like, I'm not a real journalist. And someone goes, yes, you are. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, I'm a journalist. And like, don't say that, because a real journalist is going to be offended by that. And I'm like, I'm whatever you want. But what I know is that I do go to uncomfortable places more than a lot of journalists that I know, and get big stories that are not easy on you to as a creator to go get. And so whatever that means, and I don't really care about the label as long as it's I'm making something that feels powerful and people are into it.
Don't you love the hunt though? I love research, dude. I am so addicted to doing research.
Keeps you going, man. It's like that's the thing that's like, keep going back to it. You're like, man, here we go, back on the saddle. It's like yeah, no, trust me. And thankfully I'm surrounded by people now who feel similarly. And so it feels kind of like a, camaraderie kind of vibe. Like, okay, let's go find this stuff, right? Like, let's go get this.
Yeah, because the way that you do your research and the way that you get into your stories, you're the type of guy where somebody sees you at a Starbucks and they're going to say, oh, crap, he's here. He's up to something.
There he is, that bleached hair guy. I knew it.
So when are you going to start your game show? Because, I mean, you talked about it. Now you have to do it. You guys planted it in the universe.
Whenever you want. I mean, are you co-hosting or what?
No, I'm just going to be the guy behind the camera. I'm going to catch all your grins and all that kind of, because I thought that was very funny when they were trying to get Jeff to laugh. I just thought, oh, of course they did. You never get to see that stuff.
You don't think about that, but you're like, of course they were doing that. Right? It's like, yeah. It kind of humanized the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever Jeff wants to do it, I'll do it. I'll be the new one. But yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely not smarter than a fifth grader. I've seen that show. I don't think I am.
Is there a side of you that would like to be on the radio, or is it, because I mean, I've been at 44 years and it's like, I don't want to go back. I like this. What about you?
I grew up, one of my idols growing up was my cousin. I guess he's my cousin-in-law, technically. Basically, my cousin's husband. He was a pretty popular radio host here in Atlanta. There's a station called 99X back in the day.
Yeah.
And he had a show, Toucher and Rich. He's actually Rich, if you know who that is. So I grew up listening to him, and he was doing stuff that was, I mean, back then, I think he was doing stunts and like radio pranks and all kind of like just wild stuff. And I thought that was just bizarre and badass. This was his job, right? And so I grew up like, thinking that was cool, but I couldn't do that. And I found it strange when I was making audio shows. I think that podcast radio, it's whatever. I think I like the creating process more than I like doing live stuff. I think the live stuff is just like a component that I just have to do, right? Yep. That like I'm good for, but it's not really like what I do it for,
Yeah. Dude, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. You're down there in Atlanta. I'm up here in Charlotte. Maybe one day we can drop this Dirty Birds thing that we've got with those Atlanta Falcons. They stink. We hate them.
Oh, man. How y'all doing, though? Y'all aren't doing that great, are you?
We suck.
I'm sorry. Is Baker Mayfield, is he hurt? Is he playing? Does it matter?
No, he's down in Jacksonville now. We've got it.
I forgot. See, that's how irrelevant you got right now.
I mean, we just fired our head coach, man, after only 10 games. So
we're having a hard time too, though. I mean, we have a couple of fun players, but God, we're gonna Falcon this way out of here. We know it. We're gonna be a Falcon in any minute now.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay, dude?
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.